right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. My name is Kyle King. I'm the Managing Director of Capacity Build International, and welcome to our next webinar in our series of our 2021 webinar series on international models and emergency management in collaboration with Capacity Build International and the International Emergency Management Society, and sponsored by the Institute for Security Governance. And we will show about them here shortly. As usual, in our webinar series that we've done throughout this year, basically, we're just going to go through a few sort of administrative instructions when we get started for about 5 minutes. I'll then pass it over to Harold for some opening remarks from teams, and then we will head over to our speakers today, and we will get started with our presentation about Thailand. Now, this is also done in cooperation with with the support of course, with the Center on Integrated Rural Development for Asia and the Pacific, and very much appreciate have our distinguished guest speakers here today, which are Dr. Tavida and Dr. Vedapat. So thank you very much for joining us today. And after these remarks, I'll certainly hand the floor over to you for your introductions and your presentation, which I am very much looking forward to. So we have a lot of people that have registered for this webinar today. So we have, I think, as I can see in the chat, attending or more and still registering. So thank you very much. I do want to give a special mention to our colleagues from the Philippines joining us today for this webinar. So just really quick about the webinar series that we've had so far. We are now on 12 of 25 events. We've had 936 that have attended the webinar series and representing 64 nations. So if you want to just let us know really quick, where are you joining us from? And where are you currently joining us? And let us know in the chat section. Now, the Q&A feature. We often get a lot of questions about the speakers and the presentations and the models that they're using with their different national models. Please use the Q&A feature for that, because that allows us to be able to pull a report at the end of this webinar series itself. It captures all the questions itself independently instead of having to try and get those through the chat feature and pull out the questions. So use the Q&A feature, and we're also tracking those, and we'll be able to answer those questions live once we get to the end of the presentation. And what else? We will actually use some of those questions and we'll upload. If we don't have a chance to get to all of your questions today because we may run out of time, we will also post those questions in our LinkedIn event group. And if you're not there, then basically, come over and join us, because in that LinkedIn event group, we essentially have about 300 emergency managers and from the community that are available to be able to join in that community, answer questions, and request certain things within the group itself from the webinar series, some things that you might like to see. And I'll just leave that in the chat here so that you can go ahead and join that if you're not part of that event already. That also allows us to be able to post the recordings of the webinars, post slides, PDFs, and other things like that inside the event group, so you'll be able to track that throughout the rest of the series. And it's very beneficial in that way. And it also allows us to stay in touch and in tune with you and what's going on. So now also, if you haven't done that, go ahead and join the LinkedIn event and follow CBI Teams and media, and also head over to our future webinar series, where we're going to have additionally, besides Thailand, which we're covering today, we're also going to cover Kosovo. Pacific Disaster Center is next also as one of our speakers that are coming up, as well as Italy, South Africa, Germany. And we're really developing this very nicely in this Future of EM series coming up towards the end of the year. As we close out our 2021 session, we're going to be talking a lot about the future of emergency management with the University of Manchester, as well as looking at other topics such as the use of technology within emergency management and a number of other topics. So just stay tuned for that. That's coming up towards the end of the year as we close out our session. So what I wanted to highlight really quick, and Harold, I think you probably wanted to touch on this, but I'll go ahead and just mention it because I wanted to highlight some professional development opportunities. But I want to remind everybody about the team's international certification, the TQC, and Harold is obviously the expert on that, but I just wanted to do a quick refresher. And the fact that TQC is, of course, for a certification for individuals, emergency managers with a nationally recognized professional certification, or other individuals with document experience, practical or academic, in international emergency and disaster management. Now, TQC only certifies knowledge and competencies about international standards. So this is really focused beyond the national models and into the international standards and requirements and best practices necessary to create an international or common understanding. So some of those objectives with the TQC, I would really recommend you take a look at it for professional development and qualifications in order to be able to promote global competence in emergency management, share best practices, and support an international collaboration, much like we're doing with this webinar series itself. So there's a link down below. Take a look at that if you're interested in an additional international qualification. And that with CBI, we are also teaching the NATO Crisis Management Disaster Response course. Our next session with the University of California, where we teach, is going to be opening in September. Registration will be opening up shortly. And by completing that course, you'll actually get 2 certificates, one for professional development from the University of California, and then also a NATO certificate from our partner, which is the NATO Crisis Management Disaster Response Center of Excellence. Next session starting in September. So I just wanted to kind of highlight that for opportunities for professional development coming up. And at this point, what I'll do, Harold, is I'll just hand it over to you very quickly before we get started with our speakers.
Thank you, Kyle. And hello, everybody, wherever you are. I am at my summer house, so I have a very bad connection, internet connection. So I'm at the local pizzeria. So sometimes this doesn't work very well, but I do hope you hear me. I wouldn't miss this for anything to listen to Thailand as well. But my message this morning is about, we had some time ago a request from a university in Sri Lanka. They asked if they could have some 20 students listening in. And of course, that's okay. And the same thing this time. My friend Marilyn in the Philippines, she is at the fire school, and she asked if 100 students could join. And of course, we have at the moment 155 people joining. So this is excellent. But what I thought for all of you who are in educational institutions, what we are doing here, we put everything on LinkedIn with the presentations and the videos, and the same we do on the Teams website. I think all this material could be a good database for comparing the different emergency management systems around the world, and it could actually be a good basis for certain topics for the students to study. That I would really like to encourage those at the university, could see if you can get your students to look into that. There is a lot of good material there. And finally, the Teams annual conference is in the beginning of December. So go to our website and propose a paper, either a practical paper or one that has to be peer reviewed. If you want a peer reviewed paper, you need to do it before end of July. That was my comments. I look very much forward to listen to Tavida this morning.
Thank you, Harold. So now at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Tavida and Dr. Barapat and hand it over to you for your introductions and presentation. I look forward to hearing what you have to say.
At first, when I accept the invitation, I kind of hesitate a bit to somehow talking about Thailand disaster and emergency management at this point. No, just only one reason. I'm trying to choreograph my presentation. How can I fit it in perhaps 30 to 40 minutes so that we have at least 20 minutes of question and answer. And the development of Thailand disaster and emergency management is really a long way to come since the beginning. I was joining a disaster and emergency management since a tsunami in 2004 in Thailand. When I said I joined them, I'm wearing kind of 2 hats. The first has, of course, I'm the professor in the university and teaching disaster and emergency management. The other hat that I have is that I work with the Department of Disaster Prevention and Mitigation since, of course, tsunami 2004, alongside with the Pacific Disaster Center, which gonna be your next speaker anyway. The reason I mentioned this is I can't help if my talk would actually more of a practical side rather than pretty much on academic. That's what I'm planning to. You can call me Pracademia if that would suit very well. Okay. About 30 to 40 minutes from now, I'm actually bringing you to Thailand disaster and emergency management. I was kind of want you to see what's happening first, and then we jump into what made us in the journey of disaster and emergency management, what wake us up, and then what made us change over the time. And I ended up with how to look forward, what exactly that Thailand disaster and emergency management would actually go to. Good point of it. You guys are the first international attendees that are about to see the new national policy on disaster prevention and mitigation of this country. I don't. The law have not launched it yet, so I'm having a draft to present to your eyes. So you would be the first batch internationally that sees it, and it would be executed from the end of this year onward. So we will lay out on that. Okay, let me take you to what's going on first. Let's spend about 10 to 15 minutes, and then I will move on to the system that Thailand used until today and so on. You guys already know that we went past through the Indian Ocean earthquake and tsunami before, but let me drag you back a bit. I usually don't read slides, so you can use your eyes while you're listening to me. I was at that time looking at the event that happened in Thailand in 2004 as a waking up. If you ask me, I certainly am very confident to say that the history of disaster management in Thailand, a real history, started after Indian Ocean tsunami in 2004, which means that the work that have done before in Thailand, before a 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, I would have said that it's all science. We look at disaster pretty much a technical issue, technical problem, and we somehow seem to cope with a disaster before that year as it seemed to be annual event, as it seemed to be a shocking phenomenon. The system was not there. The law, we don't have a disaster law on that day yet. We have a related law that we've been using as of it is somehow regulate how a disaster was managed within a country. So among the admiration that we done it well in 2004 Indian Ocean, I don't think so. The only reason that I can say that we might be able to do it quite relatively better than the other nations in 2004, it's probably because the severity is less, because we only have the twin, we only have a tsunami. We didn't have an earthquake together with a tsunami, much like in Indonesia. So I would have put it there. And then the change started there. The change start to reform everything. We have a Disaster Prevention and Mitigation Act, newly launched in 2010. I will move to the explanation within it. We changed the new law in correspond to the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami. However, the flaw of the Thai system, to me, from 2004, it seemed to me that the Thai government has interpreted whatever that went down that day as not knowing. So we're taking a tsunami as the unknown. And we couldn't actually have, we didn't have disaster warning. We didn't have a tsunami warning system back in that day. We didn't even have a knowledge what's the difference between a tsunami and a giant wave. So basically, you were talking about almost ground zero. So afterward, it has a psychology. There's this dilemma because since we explain on that data, because we have too many unknown. So since we known already from time goes by, then we seem to stop. Even if we have a huge lesson learned in terms of we really cannot make a collaborative governance of a disaster back in 2004. So in 2011, Thailand has a mega flood. I think this is very pretty well known to everyone. And during that mega flood, it reflects the most important thing of disaster and emergency management in Thailand, which is political conflict and a fragmentation, or in political science, we use the term departmentalization. Basically is because of the conflict during that year in 2011, you might have heard it in the name of yellow and red shirts, kind of like political unrest, political conflict. And because of that, there is a competition between the central government and the local government. trying to manage flood in a different direction, in a different way, especially the whole Thailand versus Bangkok as a capital city. Bangkok is not a province. Bangkok is a capital city, which is in a city level, local government. So back in that day, we have too many conflict, different direction, and a classic problem of bureaucratic system. We don't work together very well, regardless different parties, different affiliation or political contact. So we quite couldn't get the flood managed very well, given that problem. Later on, we also confront with Melao earthquake. In Melao earthquake, we only have one death from the earthquake. To everyone else, it's a little soft. To me, it hurt. Why? I analyzed on that day that Thailand is somehow weird. We have a lot of knowledge in earthquake. Our local people know about earthquake. And Chiang Rai is not pretty much high risk of earthquake zone. It's medium kind of thing. So to me, what's going on? Why isn't that the local house that actually renovated several years ago by the locals is actually tear apart because of the earthquake and make people die? This reflects a lot local knowledge, local technical people, engineering, those kind of places. Basically, the problem on that day to me is we could not actually communicate the knowledge of race over there. So these are what's going on for the past several years. And recently we confront with a different kind of disaster, which basically I call it crisis. And of course, COVID-19, everyone knows it. And it's going on right now. PM 2.5 is different thing. It's a problem of the law. We don't have a pollution as a disaster. We have a pollution as a crisis. So basically, we have not had the agency who taking care of how to actually mitigate this. We have Department of Pollution Control. Yes, we do, but that's a regulator. But we have not had a person, let's say the governor, the mayor, if they want to stand up one day and say, what should I do today? People cannot get out of the house. That's still questionable. Have they had an authority and power to manage it? That's still a question. So in COVID-19, I think you have heard about Thailand a lot. For the first wave of COVID last year, during the same time last year, Thailand is already launching exit strategy. We kind of like admired ourselves of making a zero contracted cases for several months, but then we didn't learn well. As you know, right now we have a problem of too high of centralization in the system of disaster management, and that's actually lead us to inefficiency and ineffectiveness in terms of coping with second wave, and then right now we are in a third wave. And for the past several days, our medical system is almost actually cannot withstand anymore. We are looking at 200 to 300,000 number. And yep, we are in the bad shape. Even me, I have to work from home for 2, 3 months already, almost total lockdown. So this is what happening in Thailand. So the reason that I'm bringing all this to you at your eyes first, because I would love to bringing you into a country that you are talking about developing country. You are talking, yes, we have law. I'm about to show you that. We have an act, yes. But then I don't think what it is that we learn for is about what we had on the written document. I think we are talking about how we exactly manage the circumstance or the event or the crisis at each different type, different unknown, different known, and then how we manage it together. So I'm pretty much looking at the mechanisms, whether or not it works or it not. This is a picture of how this recent disaster has been made. We have a problem because, as you can see, your left hand side here on the green circle, this is pretty much a medical team management. This is public health and medical. This one is the other management. In Thailand, when I give my analysis, I always say this time you're talking about a disaster management, which is a system of management to be able to manage medically. So you have two management systems underlying this, which is not very good in terms of parallel and coordinating. and we just have a fire, you might have heard, and we kind of like having a problem. This is an easy part of our system. We confront with fire all the time. This time it's about data system within a factory that have chemical compound and that create a different kind of explosion and fire. We spend 26 hours just this area to actually extinguish it. uh we have only one death, but to me that's bad, because not because one or two or three or 10, but because that one that death is a frontline agencies, which is just because we didn't know exactly what it is over there in the factory. And this is a surprise to me. By law, a factory is supposed to submit all the document and details so that if anything happen, we can actually well manage. Then, for all the event that I actually spent about 15 minutes talking, leading to I introduce you to these are the law and the plan, this overview of Thailand. Thailand had disaster at this point, recent day. We have a Disaster Prevention and Mitigation Act starting from 2007. And this act was revised from a 2000 tsunami. We tried to correct a lot of lesson learned that is perhaps misconduct or a shortfall or the gaps. So you can see that in the overview of it, this Disaster and Emergency Act, let me call it Disaster Act so that it's a little shorter. And this act, actually under the act, we have a National Disaster Prevention and Mitigation Plan. At this point, at this moment, since the new plan perhaps be at the end of this year, so we're still using the national plan of 2015. And as you can see, since this is 2015, this plan is actually foresight, what Sendai framework, and the end of Hyogo framework, and then the starting point of Sendai framework. So this National Disaster and Prevention and Mitigation Plan has emphasizing on disaster risk reduction to correspond with the Sendai framework. However, with this plan, if you look at the left hand, your right hand side first, I'm sorry, your right hand side, you will see that we also have a lot of national plan in the same level as a National Disaster Prevention and Mitigation Plan. Look at the bright side. Since we already have an arrow here, so it means that it's all linked. It's all linked. This national strategy plan, we have 20-year national plan. We have a master plan, which is taking care of climate change and disaster. We have national security, of course, because disaster is also non-traditional security. We have Thailand 4.0 vision. We have economic plan, social development. We have national preparedness strategy, and we have the adaptation plan. Although these plans seem to actually think thoroughly of every dimensional in terms of impact, in terms of what ahead, in terms of the link between disaster and climate change, we done it well in the document. But then I would like to shed some other dimension here. Since your right hand side is on national level, that is a problem. When any written thing in these documents conflict with one another, which one is bigger than the other? Which one has higher authority than the other? And that's conflicting how we manage things together. That's the first problem. If you look at the middle one, which is a detail within the national plan, why did I emphasize on the national plan? Usually a disaster act is very thin. The disaster act, no one would actually make the act that thick. When it's thin, it's only detailing power and authorities. What exactly helped the nation to form a model of management is the plan. Under the plan, you can see Thailand has a system of central government, regional government, which is provincial per se, as equal as like provincial municipality as in Asian, most of the Asian country, or prefecture and municipality in Japan. This is pretty much like state. You have federal, right? Central government, state, which is equal to regional or provincial, and then you have city. Then it's pretty much equal to municipality in Thailand or Bangkok per se. So under that kind of structure, the disaster prevention and mitigation missions is under supervision of Ministry of Interior as equal to Ministry of Internal Affairs per se. So this kind of body controlling provincial governor and all the provincial government. So basically by structure, disaster prevention and mitigation, emergency response, recovery is under a conduct of the governor. That's as easy as the same as in any other country, especially in Asia, because the governor is actually has jurisdiction over the area. So that would actually make him incident commander per se. So by that, we have this kind of body to actually governor, mayor of the city to actually help coordinate. Bangkok has a different structure, but somehow in the same kind of underlying that Bangkok is using that plan, incident plan, operational plan to manage the district as an area management. And this is what the structure of overall the taking care of disaster prevention and mitigation. And under that, we have, of course, a board of a DRM system. This national board, it actually cover a full spectrum of disaster risk management and overlook of everything. So if you ask me, it's pretty much, I can see from the chat box that we have a lot of Filipinos and Philippine students. This as equal to your council. But when you manage this kind of thing, so full authority over here, and to be a board that's supervising all the activities, all the evaluations, and all the plan, all the law that the country has to manage it through the Disaster Act and the plan. The central agency, and this is a little tricky. The central agency that taking care of disaster prevention and mitigation of Thailand is the Department of Disaster Prevention and Mitigation. From you from the US, my department is perhaps equal to your subdivision or bureau. The department is under Ministry of Interior. This department at the department level has to coordinate with a lot of departments to work on disaster prevention and mitigation, emergency response, recovery, and international cooperation. However, however, the body of the Department of Disaster Prevention and Mitigation only stop at the provincial level. If you look at this slide, we also have local administration here that is a frontline agency out there in the local area. But then the department that is a central department that link all the prevention and mitigation, emergency response and recovery in the country only have their people at the provincial level. You can see a missing link here, and that would create a lot of problem in terms of decentralization, making local capacity enhancing, and using a community-based disaster risk management. That would create a lot of problem. We all know that we need a really strong body. These are 27 key state agencies in terms of making disaster management in Thailand. These are like Ministry of Interior. We have like Department of Defense. We have all the militaries. We have foreign affairs. We have agriculture. We have public health. We every ministry that exists, and all of the permanent secretary and the deputy minister and minister is all on the board. You can picture when things happen and you call in for those who make decision at the board level, only you call their name and their division and their ministry, you might actually already ended up with spending like 20 minutes before you're doing a meeting or decision making. So it's a lot. And Thailand pretty much, especially under this government, we pretty much using what I call centralized, making bureaucratic system really big. So everything is centralized. So decision making is made at the department or ministerial levels. And then even slow down a capacity building in the local area, as well as to make the frontline agencies actually good at multi-hazard. Only one hazard already difficult. You're talking multi-hazard and you're talking compound hazard, even more difficult. And that would actually lack within Thailand. These are our key agencies. Each of them, this is another problem. Each of them has their own act, which is count as national act as well. For example, let's take COVID-19. Right now we are under emergency decree. Believe it or not, we have Communicable Disease Act. We couldn't use it because Communicable Disease Act has only Minister of Public Health at top. Emergency decree has a prime minister at top, but Disaster Act also has a prime minister at top. My question is, why don't you use Disaster Act? Why you use emergency decree? This also indicate how you want it to be under control with a little bit of centralized system. Otherwise, you use the Disaster Act that localize, decentralize the capacity to those in the area. That's what triggered me that you can write any plan and any act as beautiful as it is, but the problem would be your style of management. These are the structure of disaster risk management mechanisms and all the structure of chain of command and chain of communication. As you can see on the left-hand side, I'm pretty much going to go brief on it. The Prime Minister is on top, as I said. And then we have a command headquarters, which is run by the Department of Disaster Prevention and Mitigation, managing to the province and Bangkok. We have 76 province plus Bangkok, which is as equal in terms of status. They are local though, but they are local administration, but as equal as provincial one. Managed by the power of governors. And then at the area that disaster might happen or emergency happen, it would start it to be managed and commanded by a mayor or sheriff of the city and those local area on your left hand side. On your right hand side, that's it's pretty much a structure, and then the different colors has indicate different agencies that have to work together. And basically, you were talking about a lot of coordination, a lot of collaborative linkage. But as I said, as long as a different color has a different act, allow them, authorize them to work on their own, then if you're professional enough, you collaborate. If you are not, fragmented, siloism. And that wouldn't actually make an orchestra have a very good song, couldn't it? Because you each done what you want. And that has been a problem in Thailand like forever. We have problem in flood. We have problem in PM 2.5, and we have problem in COVID-19. These disasters would actually go to the same thing. We couldn't work quite well and coordinate quite effectively and systematically. From all of it, Thailand has managed under a four key point on your left hand side since 2015. And that would end when we're getting into a 2021 revision, which about to get out. I suppose it might be August that we are going to launch a new one. So let's start with what we are under first. For the past 6 years, 6 years, and actually even before 2015, we're using this kind of strategy, and the focus is to make Thailand going. So we emphasize on, this is a national strategy. We emphasize on risk management, on risk reduction, and those emergency management, strengthening efficient kind of thing, and of the recovery in terms of disaster risk reduction in each of the strategy. And we kind of like, we done it very well. If you ask me what exactly in this four on your left hand side that Thailand done well, I would have said emergency management. Thailand has really well developed and improved for the past, I known them for 17 years. So if you ask me from that day in tsunami until now today, which one improved the most, I would say a second one. The emergency system, the expertise, training, all everything to actually be intact and manage it. So I think that strengthening the system, not so bad. But only when you have to kind of like make multi-agency coordination MAC system, we have a little problem when we do MAC, because when you actually put another agency transforming the system to be bigger and you're plugging in a lot of agencies, that's the problem. Why? Incident command system in Thailand, especially single command, couldn't work well. The idea of single command is you have one direction of command, right? But then single command would actually let someone else command too. Am I right? We didn't talk about single commander, which we don't use it. In single command system, you have one command, but then it's translate, and then it's actually turn over to the other commander at the specific tasks. By governing culture in Thailand, surprised that it is, everyone wants to be able to actually command everyone. So it couldn't quite work well because it's too centralized. So that's the only problem that I see in emergency management would improve very well. In terms of recovering, Thailand is still learning. The idea of DANA system, damage and need assessment, damage and need like post PDNA. Thailand just learned this about 2-3 years ago. It's under the development of making the post-disaster need assessment approach systematically and effectively launched out. Have not yet done that in a full way. And to enhance the concept of build back better, the idea is there, but not quite move it at the moment because a lot of build back better tie with regulations, laws, and acts. As pretty much in developing country, a lot of laws, a lot of legislature is actually written to try to make people not doing things wrong. By making that kind of too many laws in that way, then disaster or crisis usually fall into the area that the law doesn't say no and the law doesn't say yes. And because of that, a lot of build back better fall into that way. Why are you building it back better? Why didn't you build it back the same way it used to be? Is there any corruption going there? Why are you doing this? These kind of questions is actually make people hesitate to build back better. This is my personal story back in 2005 when I was trying to make a tsunami warning tower. There is one executive question asking to me, Professor, since you spend a lot of money actually making a tsunami warning tower, can you tell me one tower can save how many people? I was stunning by that kind of question. I can't answer that because a warning tower is not to help people. The warning tower is to tell people to help themselves. So you cannot ask me how many people the tower can help. We are not going to actually let people climbing in tower and then just stay there. So basically, this kind of cost benefit question is actually an abstract build back better. In terms of international coordination, I think we don't need a lot of knowledge transfer, technical transfer pretty well. We learned a lot for the past 15 years and 6 years back since 2015. However, your left hand side is what we use to cope with all the story I told you before. From now on onward, Thailand is going to, in the next couple days or weeks, Thailand is launching this 5 strategy instead. This 5 strategy resemble what is actually on your left hand side, the first 4. If you take a look at it, it's trying to do that. However, the thing that actually increase more, if you really take a look, and it's actually reflect on what is missing. If you really see that we actually add the 5th one, information management system and application of disaster innovations. Thailand has a lot of problem in terms of making big data and using analytical data to coordinate a lot of disaster management. And I'm not talking about Doppler radar data information. I didn't talk only about a buoy's information. I didn't only talk about precipitation, inundation, or a seismometer that producing seismic data. No, I didn't mean only that. I mean that we have to overlay those multi-hazard technical scientific data over on the map. And then you have another factors in risk formula overlaying it. What? Exposure, vulnerability in terms of social, vulnerability in terms of connection, vulnerability in terms of physical, vulnerability in terms of diversity. We have not had that yet. And also we have not had a data enough in terms of capacity resources to overlay and then make the whole risk map an effective one. And we still have lack of public-private partnership and enhancing an investment in terms of disaster risk reduction. And that's per se mean insurance as well. So by all means, these will be the direction that Thailand is going for the next, I hope perhaps 5 years, since the strategy is pretty much during that period. And last but not least, at the very end of my presentation, those of international coordination, we have a lot of partner. And that partner basically is bilateral. We with JICA, we with GTZ, we with Pacific Disaster Center, we with like a lot of international organization and also UN agencies. And we also have a very strong position on the AADMR, which is an ASEAN agreement in terms of making disaster in the region a collaborative one. These are what Thailand has done in terms of moving on to make a technical knowledge transfer and then make the status in terms of international community strategic position where the Thailand would lie. And the area that we joined and we jumped in is actually risk assessment, warning and monitoring and preparedness, which is pretty much done. We are actually providing a computer system as well to work with the ASEAN member country. And we have invested a lot in terms of ERAT team, that emergency rapid assessment team into ASEAN body. And we still have a lot of challenge because, as I said, as a intersection between national system, provincial system, and local system in Thailand. When you add international system on top, it's a lot complicated. And even if we would love to make a local a heart, an idea, a core of disaster prevention and mitigation, there's still a lot of work to get done. Disaster management, we are together today. We are the people who fond of, who love disaster. We know how important that is. But then if you look at the shoulder of any government for developing country, you still confront with what? Poverty, education, economic depression. So even if we understand a disaster risk is actually a bottom line of making a security for human security, but then to win an agenda, to win a table, to make this afford, to bring local on top, to enhance them, to make a data system that we can use the whole country as one direction united, to make everything risk reduction. You're going to build bridge, then you think of risk reduction. You're going to build building, you think of risk reduction. It's still hard, it's still difficult. So to plug in international system with the national to local system, it's still doubt to me. And this the chair that Thailand has in terms of trying to keep up on board. It's kind of like two different worlds. We have a world of technology, academia, central government, national level that done push a lot in terms of technology, innovation, analytical piece. But then you have the local. Some of the area knows nothing about disaster and crisis. We still have that kind of gap with the utilization of these fancy thing couldn't actually blend in mainstream and make it a little mingling with the local kind of like norms of life. I still can see that as a shortfall. And this is my ending slide. We are the second hub of ASEAN. So Thailand also implement DELSA, which is a logistic and emergency stockpile for the region. So in terms of running international coordination, the fourth strategy for the next years to come, that would be a focus that we actually moving toward to. Okay, I'm ending my presentation and thank you for listening. I'm trying to limit myself to 40 minutes. I hope I done that. So.
All right, thank you very much. That was fantastic. Thank you, very informative. We do have a few questions So if I could ask you just a few questions. The first one that came up was, does Thailand have a strategy for encouraging or requiring construction to be earthquake resilient?
Yes, of course. Wow, I would love to bring in another research that I has. I just finished a 5 years research, and we already have that. We already have formula. We already have a building code on the table, trying to implement that as one of the regulations to make the earthquake resistant building. And since 2007, all the construction act has also enforced and then make the construction have to calculate a parameter of the shake of the ground into the building as well. However, we still have a lot of buildings that is, I call it aging structure in two meanings. First, you have aging structure that actually really age because it's built before the law, the act that actually control this. So by that, we still have to launch a lot of incentive. We still trying to design an incentive for the owner of the building or house, because some area in Thailand, the risk structure, it's not a building. A risking structure is perhaps 2 floors of household. That would actually really risky. And since we have a lot of we still have a middle class and people below poverty line, to be able to encourage them to actually do retrofit in terms of the structure is still difficult. And the other way around is public building or public structure, which is really aging. We still have not had a full inspection of every structure. So lucky us, and unlucky though, by the way. Earthquake is not very frequent. We are not in a very high risk zone. I can call it middle. Relatively, we still have a lot of impact from Myanmar, a lot of impact from Indonesia. But one way to look at it, it's it, it hurt us not yet very much. So the slowing down of inventing and designing an incentive, fine, we have not in that urge yet. But then the dilemma is, since because of it's not severe, it's really difficult to put it on the table, this incentive. And it is difficult to encourage them. This is what the research of mine has done. In my research, we recommend that we have a resort in Chiang Rai, up north, near Myanmar. We has right now on the table that if Chiang Rai can have their own law, their own act, in terms of launching that, if any homeowner retrofit their house in the risk area, the list of construction equipments and those materials, if it is purchased and done by the list of the Department of Civil Engineering and Urban Planning, then you can use that price to reduce an income tax, annual income tax. If we can use that kind of incentive, or even if we can, not during this era, is really unfortunate. We have what we call a tourism tax, which is only 3%. If 1% of those 3% can actually going into an insurance fund or disaster fund, that would actually help people in the area to to make themselves invest in disaster risk, not only using a law to make the construction stronger. So that, I'm sorry, my answer is a little longer. I want to capture all. Sorry.
No, that's great. Thank you. Next question I have, and again, if I break up, just let me know and I'll repeat the question. How does the National Emergency Management System in Thailand coordinate with the ADPC, the Asian Disaster Preparedness Center?
Oh, I can answer this like 2 hours. No. um, let me tell a story a little longer. Asian Disaster Preparedness Center has been in Thailand even before a tsunami in 2004. They've been here like forever, and they've been. I look into that training system. I don't blame them at all. I look at all the training, all the knowledge transfers and everything, and I can notice that Asian ADPC is actually working a lot with Indonesia, Philippines, a little less with Thailand. And that can be explained, as I told you, to me in my research that I has been doing for the past 20 years. I think a disaster risk management in Thailand started after a tsunami in 2004. So ADPC has been here and they're helping the Department of Disaster Prevention and Mitigation form their work. That's how they originally initiate their relationship. ADPC is also a board of the Department of Disaster Prevention and Mitigation. DDPM was the pioneer training Thai agency in CBDRM, community-based disaster risk management. ADPC is also coordinated with Asian Institute of Technology, AIT, running the modeling and then calculating and helping in terms of tsunami, earthquake, flood, and launching a lot of training program and help educated Thai agency in terms of risk reduction, risk cycle, PDNA, as well as ADPC also coordinate UN agencies and international organization together for Thai agency to have the knowledge transfer and technical transfer. So ADPC is really close to the Thai government, pretty much a very good friend. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. Next question we have. We've got about 6 more minutes left, so we got a few more questions to cover. What agency or government manages the integrated emergency management of Thailand? Is it handled by the, as you were previously mentioning, a provincial government?
It depends upon what you asked in terms of disaster risk management. If you ask me how disaster risk management as a whole process is done, it's done by several agencies, pretty much like this. So disaster risk work, disaster risk task, it's under each of the department to get it done. So it's a little difficult to tell them how to mainstream a disaster risk into their work. For example, if you are a department of transportation, you are building a bridge over the canal or the river. To build a bridge that has a really huge construction in the middle of the river, it's stable, I know. But then when you have flood, when you have to actually release water very quick, or you have those of the erosion happen, you also create disaster. I'm sorry, crisis or risk. So it's difficult, really, to tell the Department of Agriculture to tell people that, you know what, we are approaching drought. Please stop you doing your farm. Don't grow rice at this period of time. It's difficult. So if you ask me how disaster risk reduction, pretty much pre-disaster, is doing, done by these several agencies. Do they coordinate the goal? Not systematically. Depends upon whether or not that goal is suddenly shared. Let me say that. But if you ask me about emergency management, what if things are happening? And then who would actually take care of things that happen? Let me do this. We have 4 levels of emergency in Thailand. If emergency level 1, for example, you have a fire in the market, a huge market, which is a public place. Municipality here, and I'm dragging here. A municipality, the mayor is actually as an incident commander level 1, managing emergency. If emergency exceed that jurisdiction to another municipality or several municipality, they can ask for the power of a district chief, as equal to the US system would be sheriff. And then you can ask them to help coordinate the different area, which is like area commander. So basically that's level 1. If it exceeds the capacity of a local authority and local administration, I'm sorry, Thailand has 2 systems run parallelly. Municipality is a local authority, local administration. A district is local authority. I'm sorry, we are confusing. Over that, if there is a disaster, For the municipality and district, they can call for the power of provincial governor as a level 2 of emergency. If it exceeds provincial, 2 provinces, or the governor feel like too difficult to complicate and it's overloading, they can ask for level 3 using the power of Minister of Interior. And then at the very top, if like pretty much right now, we are under the power of the National Incident Commander level 4, the most severe situation, the commander-in-chief would be a prime minister. So it depends upon what level you're talking about. But if you ask jurisdiction-wise, then it's under the power of usually provincial governor. The question is why? Even though you have level 1, kind of, emergency that happened, level 1. But then, capacity wise, competency wise, resource wise, provincial governor has more. So usually local authorities, local administration seem to be able to resist only for a very small scale of emergency. When it shouldn't exceed a capacity of local, shouldn't, but then they actually ask for governor power. Because in Thailand, provincial governor is really a big person within a province, and they do have more resources than the local government. So that's what it is. Kyle, give it back to you.
Very, very interesting. I want to ask one more question because we're just about out of time, but because we got some from guests from the Fire Service Training Institute here. What is the role of the Fire Service Administration in terms of emergency management in Thailand?
Wow. Okay, and I have to explain this in 2 answers because
Okay.
15 years ago, actually. Now why I'm going back that far? Fire department it's a police department. It's under a police bureau. Only not for Bangkok though. A fire department, since it is under a kind of police bureau, they actually work in other province as of when you have a fire, yes, you call for them. So usually firefighter in Thailand is only particularly work on fire issue rather than several issue much pretty much like in the US you use firemen for some other emergency as well. For Bangkok, fire department is under Bangkok governor. It's a civilian. The other province is not, and that's to the structure. So you can see that Bangkok governor has more power over the conduct and authorization of this fire department. The other would be a coordination between provincial governor with the fire department within. Local government also have their own firefighter under their local administration to work. If you ask me how they act when emergency happen, when there is let's say a fire or the triggering of a fire, then usually there is a technology that they call for news. So they've been linked with of course high frequency radio. They link with ham. They link with the network that they can call for them. We also have the number, not 911 though. We have 199, and that numbers is an emergency call for fire department. When you call them, the system would acknowledge the same thing. So they would dispatch all the relevant agency to the scene as well. But then when the fire department get to there are the incident commander at the scene. Fire department would be directly automatically work by receiving a 199 call, or they have an emergency authorization from the municipality if they are a unit under municipality. If they work with the governor, then the governor is actually issue them. And when they get to the scene, as I said, there are incident commander, and then the governor or the mayor would be a commander in chief, overlook at the incident commander at the scene. So I think I've already answered that, and but just a little bit more. Usually we also have NGO and we have a foundation And we also have what I call non-governmental unit and independent agencies, pretty much like fire professional. We also have that kind of team. And pretty much most of the time we coordinate with those guys, and those guys are so professional. They are so quick. The latest one that I show you, the Mingti fire, that the explosion that happened, it's pretty much a, oh, I forgot, I have to share, right? Let's forget it. The fire that caused by an explosion is a styrene and a chemical compound that actually create an explosion. It actually cannot be extinguished by water. They need a special kind of foam, chemical compound, and we have to get a lot of that chemical, that foam, to get in from these independent agencies, as well as we call in the firefighter of municipality nearby Bangkok. So basically, one local entity usually cannot handle, the firefighter cannot handle a pretty much a large scale of fire by their own jurisdiction, usually not.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for that. We do have a number of questions left. What we'll do is we'll send those to you if that's okay, and we'll provide those answers inside of our LinkedIn group so that everybody can get a chance to get their questions answered. I know that there's quite a few questions. This happens in almost every webinar that we're going through because a lot of people are interested in sharing experiences and hearing from others about emergency management, disaster risk reduction, and other topics. But unfortunately, we like to try and keep this. We could do this all day, actually, but we try to keep it to a certain amount of time that is digestible. So thank you very much for the presentation. I really do
You're
appreciate
welcome.
it. And it's very, very interesting. We might have to have you come back and continue that discussion as well at a later date. But
Oh, it's my pleasure. You can call me anytime.
thank you very much for that. So just to kind of close out the session, so in case you're interested about our sponsor, this is the Institute for Security Governance, working under the Defense Security Cooperation Agency, and they do focus on emergency management and resilience. In case, if you have any questions about what ISG does as part of the function of the U.S. government, you can certainly contact Mr. Scott Moreland, who's the Emergency Management and Resilience Functional Lead, as well as Ashley Woodson over at Naval Postgraduate School. And I just want to thank everybody. And Harold, I'll turn it over to you for any closing remarks.
Thank you, Kai. This was quite interesting. And what I like most with this is actually that we have so many students on board. So all of you who are responsible for students or are at universities, invite your students. There's a lot to learn. And as I said, this is going to be a great database to use for research. Thank you very much, Tavida and Shadchak. This was very interesting about Thailand. And have a good afternoon.
Okay, thanks everybody. Have a great afternoon, evening, whatever time it is for you. And we'll see you in the next webinar.